What's up, everybody? This is Ahmed with A. Roberson Photo, A. Roberson Media, and today we're going to skip the lengthy intros and we're going to talk about what's in my camera bag. So diving right into my camera bag, let's first start with, I'm going to try to do my focal lengths in order. We're going to start with my Nikon 35mm f1.8. Let's see here. Look at that wide aperture, super wide. Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am, if the ladies are watching. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. f1.8 on a DX crop like my Nikon D300. It is going to be equivalent to a 52.5mm focal length, which is similar to my 50mm f1.8, but this one is a full frame FX crop lens. So if you're wondering why I have a 35mm, which is almost equivalent to this 50mm lens, it's one, because I wanted to have a 35mm on my DX crop camera, which is equivalent to 50mm, and I wanted to have a true 50mm lens on my FX crop. Both focal lengths will be relatively the same. Both bokeh effects going to be pretty much the same. Both shallow depths of field are going to be pretty much the same, but I do have the FX and DX cameras, so I wanted focal lengths equivalent for both. But I also have an array of lenses that only work on my FX camera and some that only work on my DX camera. All things considered, FX is not necessarily going to be better than DX. Some people seem to think that FX is going to be better at night, low light. That's not necessarily true, at least not in my case. I've been shooting with my D300 and D700 both for years, and I've gotten similar, almost equal results out of both. Excuse me. The only reason I say almost equal is because the D700 does tend to give a shallower depth of field, and the reason behind that is positioning for the most part. Excuse me, drinking too much water. Positioning for the most part. So say for example, I am using my D7 or D300 with this monster on it. This monster right here is the Nikon 80-200mm f2.8. This 200mm lens on this Nikon D300 is going to be equivalent to 300mm. Well, if I'm shooting this at 300mm, I'm going to be much further away, and me being further away, it's going to narrow my focus. It's not going to be as wide as a FX crop would be. It's going to narrow my focus and bring all my focus in here, more centered towards the subject that I'm shooting. Whereas if I was to shoot this on my D700 at 200mm, it's wider, but I'm going to move closer. So therefore, this lens, if I was focused on this lens, would be more in focus, much closer, therefore having that much more bokeh in the background. I hope that makes sense to you. I mean, I almost confused myself talking about it, but I hope that makes sense to you. But anyway, let's put this lens back just for a second, because I still have some other lenses to go through, other focal lengths. But let me just backtrack just a hair for 1 second. The reason, or well, not the reason, but well, one of the reasons why I have this 35mm f1.8 lens is I use this lens almost exclusively for photographing kids. Kids tend to have better skin, smoother skin, and their eyes seem to be bigger and brighter. And I mean, that's always attractive in a photograph. If you look at the photo that I just posted right now, that kid, look at the eyes, look at the face. Of course, I did some post-processing, but not as much as I would as if I was doing a fashion photo, so to speak, you know. But using that 35mm f1.8 lens, when I photograph children, sweet spot almost every time. I mean, might as well say every time. I mean, I love it. Yeah, I use different lenses to photograph children sometimes, but more often than not, that 35mm f1.8, every time. But with this, the FX version, sorry, I'm looking down, I'm just looking at my notes trying to remember because I have so many lenses to go through. This 50mm f1.8 on my FX, I tend to use this a lot for product photography on my Nikon D700. It is an extremely sharp lens. Even wide open at f1.8, is still very sharp because it's just a well-designed lens, well-built lens. But taking a f1.8 lens and stopping it down to say f6 or something like that, even f8, that's going to be a sweet spot, a really sweet spot for this lens, and it's going to deliver quality product photography, at least for my uses. I use it for product photography, quality product photography pretty much every single time. And like I said, I use this almost exclusively. I mean, I've done a couple of portraits with it, but I use it almost exclusively for product photography. If you look at a couple of photos that I posted, you'll see. Again, of course, you post-process everything in Photoshop or whatever program you choose to use. But ultimately, I think this lens, I get great results with this lens pretty much every single time that I use it. That's why I still have it. That's why I use it. That's why I bought it. So, moving on to the next lens. Actually, this is kind of like a specialty lens for me. This is an ultra-wide 12 to 24 millimeter f4 lens from Tokina. I haven't used this lens in a while, but this bad boy, well, let me take that off. You see, it almost looks, I don't know if you can tell, it almost looks like a fisheye, but it's not a fisheye, but it almost looks like one. But its primary use is for landscape photography, but because I consider myself to be somewhat of an artist, somewhat of an artist, I like to use this for portraits. And I've done some dance photography with this, as well as landscape. I do landscape with it just the same because I think that's what its primary design is, but I like to go out the box. I mean, if you've seen any of my videos, I'm always doing something a little bit different. It might be something a little different or a whole lot different, but either way, this lens, I've used it for portrait photography along with landscape, and I mean, this is one of my favorites. And it's well built, solid built, metal body, very robust, good design, smooth focus. I mean, this lens has not let me down. I bought it maybe 10 years ago, something like that, maybe, and I've been using it ever since. I love it, and it's mine, and you're not gonna get it. You can't borrow it. It's mine. So then, after we put this bad boy back where it belongs, let's look at my next wide lens. It's not an ultra wide, but well, because it's an FX lens, it might look ultra wide in comparison. This is the Nikon 16 to 85 f 3.5 to 5.6. So it is a variable aperture lens. So when at the widest at 16 millimeters, it's going to be at f3.5. But as I tend to zoom in, I think somewhere around 25, 30 millimeters, it starts to stop down automatically because of the design, and it stops down to f5.6. After that, you have full control of the aperture at the remaining lengths from 35 millimeter all the way to 85. But from 24, it'll be f3.5, and then from 16, you'll be at f3.5, and then when you get up to 24 to 30-ish, it'll start to stop down automatically to f5.6. But this is another sweet lens. This is an FX lens, so I cannot use it on my DX camera like my D300 because it will, you'll see vignetting because of the crop sensor. You'll end up seeing the inside of the lens or the lens barrel, and you don't want that in none of your portraits, right? Sorry, I'm just making sure my screensaver stays up there. Yep. Finally, yep. But but anyway, because of the focal length at 16 millimeters wide, if I was to put that on an FX frame, the FX sensor being that much bigger, or I'm sorry, if you were to put that DX or this lens on a DX camera with the ultra wide, because of the crop factor, you may likely see some of the lens barrel. It's just something about it. It's designed exclusively for FX cameras, so it doesn't, I mean, it'll focus, but I don't think you'll be able to use it at 16 millimeter. It will show some of the vignetting, so you would have to zoom in, basically, in effect, rendering it somewhat useless. But if I want to go wide, somewhat similar in focal length, I tend to use this Tamron 17 to 50 f2.8, I believe. Is it? I think so. Yep, it is f2.8 Tamron 17 to 50. I've been using this bad boy for about 10 years just the same, and I've used this for product photography also. This was before, well, when I first started doing product photography and I didn't have any prime lenses or macro lenses for product photography. I would use this. I've used it for portraits as well, but lately, because I have so many different lenses, portrait wise, I use this for product photography. Or if I tend to go hiking or do something casual and I don't want to carry some of my bigger lenses, this at 17 millimeters to 50 millimeters is going to give me a good enough range to get a wide landscape shot if I was out hiking somewhere beautiful, or if I saw a deer or a bear and I don't want to get that close. I'll try to zoom in at 50 millimeters. Not that 50 millimeters is that long, but it keeps me from being 17 millimeters close to that bear, right? So that's why I still keep that lens and carry it when I go hiking or do something like that. And just to backtrack to the 16 to 85 really quick, I use this lens for portrait photography pretty much exclusively. Yeah, at 16 millimeter I could do some landscape with it, but being that I have my 12 to 24 millimeter and my 50 millimeter or my 35 millimeter lenses, I don't necessarily carry this with me for my landscape. If I do landscape, that's what I have the Tamron for, right? Right. So just wanted to explain what I use that for. And then going down the list, we have this monster. This monster right here is one of my favorites. This is my Sigma f2.8 150 millimeter macro lens. This lens is beautiful. I do a lot of product photography with this lens. This lens, I mean, it doesn't stay mounted on my camera all the time, but it doesn't leave it that often either. I actually did a magazine cover back in 2012. Yes, I did. Hold on, let me pause for applause. Thank you. I appreciate it. Just being silly, just a little silly, right? But I used this lens. I used this lens for a magazine cover, and they loved it. I didn't have to reshoot it. Didn't have to do anything special other than take a good photograph, and that's what I did with this bad boy here. But aside from it being a good portrait lens, it does great for macro photography, product photography. I do a little macro recreationally. I've not necessarily been hired to do any macro, but if I just feel like shooting for the sake of shooting and I want to do some macro, this is the guy. This is the one that I use for that. And product photography, almost all the time. A lot of clients want their product photos extremely sharp. Bam, this is where I go. Yeah, the focal length makes me have to step back a little further than I necessarily like, but all things considered, it's worth it and it gets the job done every single time. Love this lens. And last but not least, this monster. Oh, so before I talk about this monster really quick, it's a metal body, weather sealed, metal. D700, metal body, weather sealed, metal, 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 heavy, heavy. Yeah, I'm a pretty big dude, yeah, true, but still, lugging this bad boy around for a while, heavy. This is the Nikon 80 to 200 millimeter f2.8. Love this lens. Love it, love it, love it. I bought this bad boy used off eBay. If I can remember, it was years ago. If I can remember, I want to say I paid somewhere between $600 or $800 for it, and I think that's a good price considering I've seen it online on Amazon for $2,100. So this was a steal of a deal at around $800 and something. I bought it many years ago, and obviously I still have it, still keep it. I use this for portraits. I'm not necessarily a sports shooter, but I've done some action shots with Penny, and I've also done studio beauty photography with this bad boy. I love this lens. Sharp, fast focus, well built, has an aperture ring on it. Matter of fact, so I guess if you had a camera that didn't have a focus motor, you could manually focus here. Let's see, let me go to manual focus rather. And let's see if I can unlock this. Oh, where'd it go? Let's see if I can unlock this aperture ring. There we go. There's a little switch here that locks it. I hope you can see that right there. There's a little switch that locks it. But you could manually change the aperture if you were shooting on maybe a film camera or something like that that didn't have a focus motor built in. Thankfully, my D300 has a focus motor, so I don't have to worry about that. But also, while I have this off, I just realized something. This lens is, I guess you would call it a hybrid type lens, right? Where, sorry, just making sure my screensaver stays up back there. Yep. This is a hybrid lens, meaning I can use this on my D300, which I have it mounted on now. And I think I mentioned before, on a D300, this 200 millimeter lens, 80 to 200 at 200 millimeters, this would be equivalent to 300 millimeters. So every blue moon, I'll take myself outside and do some bird watching. If I want to do some bird watching and snap photos of birds, bam, this is the way I go. D300 with the 80 to 200 millimeter, basically 300 millimeter equivalent, gets me that much closer to the birds. But I can also put it on my D700, which is full frame, and I use that for portraits. So it's a good focal length at 80 millimeters on a full frame sensor, or I can zoom into maybe 135, 150 millimeter. Perfect, sweet spot portraits pretty much every single time. And also, going back to this other beast, bam, this guy is also a hybrid. I can use it on my D300 or D700, and it's not gonna, I guess because of the focal length, it's not gonna cause any vignetting with the crop sensor or full frame sensor. So both my longer lenses are hybrid, and that works great for me. So if I'm grabbing a lens and need to take a shot in a pinch, bam, I grab either one, I'm good to go. So that is that. And did I talk about this lens? I think I did. Yep, I did. So, and almost lastly, getting ready to wrap this up. I know I'm talking your ear off. I mean, as much as you love to hear me talk, I know you want me to wrap it up, right? So before I wrap it up really quick, if I go hiking and I don't feel like lugging around my big heavy metal cameras, I have this old guy. Well, not super old, actually it's newer than my D300 and D700. I think this came out in 2012, whereas my D300 and D700 came out in 2007, 2008, 2006, something like that. Either way, this guy, the Nikon Coolpix P7100, has a articulating screen. I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. I don't know if you looked at my other video where I was talking about camcorders versus DSLRs for vlogging. I'm old school. I like my DSLRs to do what DSLRs do, and I like my camcorders to do what camcorders do. So I don't necessarily go for the hybrids, but I bought this because it takes good quality photos, and It's lightweight, it's quality, it's Nikon. I'm a Nikon shooter. You know, I don't know if you saw my camera bag is a Canon camera bag, and I'm doing video on a Canon. I'm making myself sick talking about it because I'm Nikon for life, Nikon to the heart. I'm just being silly again, but this guy works great. I mean, power's right up. I haven't used it in a while, but it works. Can I see? Yeah, that's me. That's my mug. Yep. But anyway, I use this for light travel. If I ride my bike somewhere, of course, I'm not going to ride my bike with my DSLRs hanging on me with them big heavy lenses. So I take that, I can put it in my pocket or put it in my backpack or whatever I have with me, snap a good shot, and I know it's going to deliver quality when I get home to post-process. And I believe it has the same 10.2 megapixel sensor as my D300 and D700 does. But again, I'm not in the megapixel race. The largest size print I've ever done was a 30 by 40, and I had no issues whatsoever. Even with the magazine cover that I submitted the photo, I did that with my D700, I believe, or D300. Either way, they're both 10 megapixel cameras, and it printed, published, all that good stuff, and it was no issues whatsoever. So that's my little travel camera. Yeah, I'm sure you might be able to get just as good, if not better, photos on your cell phone, but what if you had to use your cell phone for something, or if you were talking to somebody and you didn't want to multitask, you got the camera, bam, pull out that little, or you want to take a shot, pull out that little camera, snap a shot, you're good to go, right? Or maybe you could do both with your phone, talk and take pictures. I don't know, but me, I like to have a dedicated camera for its dedicated purpose. Use my phone for what it's used for. Yeah, I snap shots every now and then, but I digress. Anyway, and before I wrap this up, I just want to talk about lighting. Of course, you can't do good photography without good lighting. And the lights that I use, I'm not going to bring them out because they're in my closet in my studio / office. But I use Alien Bees, Paul C. Buff Alien Bees lights. I don't know if you guys use them or not, but I've been using them for years, and I've had nothing but success with them. All the photos that I've shown you, all the portraits that I've taken, and product photography, I do that either with my trusty old Nikon D800. This bad boy is super old, 2005-ish, I think, something like that. I don't know, 2003, 2005, Nikon SB800 speed light. Works great. Still use it. Knock on wood. It's going to last me that many more years to come. But if I'm doing other product photography, big products, something that needs a lot more light, a lot more control, I use my Alien Bees. I have 2 Alien Bee B400s, and I tend to use those for background lights to make the background white. Or even when I did portrait photography, if I did portraits in a studio with a white background, the B400 Alien Bees are great accent lights. They're perfect for that. Also, I have White Lightning lights, which is by the same company, but they're a better build. They're metal body, more power, and built-in fan, or I think the fan is variable or something like that. It's just a better quality strobe. And I use the White Lightnings. I have 3 of those. I have 2 X1600s. I can use those for portraits or rim lights or side accent lights. And then I have an X3200, and that thing is a big heavy metal beast. It is a super powerful light. And the best part about that, when I did a lot of portrait photography, I would do my photography outdoors on a bright sunny day. And in order to get good quality photos, you want to take your camera and step the aperture down to like f10 or something like that, right? I know they have the sunny 16 rule, but I rarely shoot portraits at f16 because it just makes my background too dark. So I'd shoot anywhere between 1/250th, because that's my flash sync speed, and ISO would be either ISO 100 or 200, whatever the lowest native ISO is of my camera. And my f-stop would usually be anywhere between f10 or up to f13 on a super ridiculously bright day. But with my White Lightning X3200, my White Lightning X3200, that thing is so powerful. With my shutter speed at f1/250th and my f-stop at f10 to up to f13, I can still darken my background to make a sweet portrait and have enough light go onto my subject to make a good balance, good portrait balance. Matter of fact, if you look at the portrait that I just posted, you'll see that was shot, it's high noon, the sun is up high, bright sunny day, but my background is nice and well balanced, and so is my subject. I use that either with a softbox. Most likely I'll use it with a silver metal beauty dish. That way, because it amplifies the lighting that much more, makes it that much more intense. And you need heavy, powerful, intense lighting when shooting like that. So the X3200 is usually my go-to light in situations like this. And then, like I said, I mentioned the beauty dish. I have a bunch of different modifiers that I use, all from Paul C. Buff, Alien Bees. But that is my arsenal for the most part. Of course, I got a couple of flash triggers and a couple of grids and other screens and gels and stuff like that. But for the most part, that's my setup. All my lenses, my cameras, my lighting, how I do it. I think I'm pretty good at it. I hope you think so just the same. But just in case you were wondering, I just wanted to share what's in my camera bag. And I think that'll wrap it up for this video. And until next time, this is Ahmed with A. Roberson Photo, A. Roberson Media, and I am out.